Short answer, by combining the maneuverability of their ships with the wind and current systems of the North Atlantic to island hop to America. Recently I made a video about the Volta navigational technique, which was also the base principle Columbus used in his voyage across the Atlantic. The Volta makes use of the trade winds to reach America and the Westerlies to go back. This was not the way the Vikings got to America, as they had a different starting point much further north. Firstly, we need to establish which Vikings reached America. The Vikings consisted of three primary groups with three different roads across the sea out of Scandinavia. These groups coincide with the current three nations of Sweden, Denmark and Norway. Their geographical positions meant that they went to different areas across the sea. The Swedes mainly went east across the Baltic Sea to Eastern Europe and Russia, down the rivers to the Black Sea and Constantinople. The Danes went west, southwest along the southern coast of the North Sea to England and France, and further down to Iberia and the Mediterranean. It is therefore the Norwegian Vikings who are of interest here, as they went across from Norway to Scotland and Ireland and up north to the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Greenland and finally America. The reason for this is both closeness but also the wind and current conditions of the North Sea. As the North Atlantic current is pushed north around Britain by the Westerlies, a portion of it veers south into the North Sea. This makes most of the currents of the North Sea south-going, except a northward current that goes up along the Norwegian coast. This means that you can ride the current north out of the North Sea from Norway. This only means that you can go back into the North Atlantic current, which goes east, not west. But there is a second important aspect at work. The polar front sits at around 60 degrees parallel north. Most of the North Sea is affected by the westerlies, but north of the polar front, polar easterlies become more dominant. Therefore, the Norse Vikings could sail out with easterlies at their back north of the 60 degrees parallel. And to go back, they could sail south into the westerlies. These were optimal conditions for going across the North Atlantic. Their main original target would have been Scotland and Ireland, but they also found the Faroe Islands and settled these. It is important to note that the Viking discovery of America was very different from the voyage of Columbus. Theirs was not a single journey all the way. It was not even like the Portuguese development of the Volta do Mar, which had the ships return home each time. The Vikings made a series of settlements across the Northern Ocean, where the next step was made from the latest settlement, much like the Polynesian settlement of the Pacific. The Faroe Islands and Iceland were settled directly from Norway. The settlement of the Faroe Island is not historically documented, but Iceland is normally said to have been settled by 874 AD. It is from Iceland that Greenland was settled. Eric the Red was exiled from Iceland around 982 AD. Exiling was a common reason for new Scandinavian settlements. He traveled to Greenland and got others to join him there. To go to Greenland from Iceland, he would most likely have used the winds and currents of the Icelandic low pressure zone, commonly known as the Iceland Low. The Iceland Low rotates counterclockwise, so he would have sailed north around it and into the south-going East Greenland current. Due to the sailing conditions of Greenland, he would have followed the flow south and then west to finally go north with the current up the west coast of Greenland. It is this part of the Greenlandic coast that is ice-free even in winter, thus he would have settled there. To return to Iceland, to get more settlers, he would go out from the coast until he could go down with the south-going current of the Baffin Bay near to Baffin Island. This would bring him down into the North Atlantic current and westerlies, which flows east to become the southern part of the Icelandic Low, which along with the Azores High drives the current east. He could then follow the Icelandic Low's rotation back to Iceland. It is important to note that when going out to settle new lands, the Vikings would use the Knar rather than the longship. The Knar was not rowed that much, so it needed to follow the wind and currents. Knowledge of the settlements would reach Norway through mouth to mouth rather than the settlers returning to Norway, but they would officially remain subject to Norway. It would be so through the entire history of the dual monarchy of Denmark-Norway, but when Denmark and Norway were split after the Napoleonic Wars, Norway would enter a dual monarchy with Sweden, while its North Atlantic possessions would remain under the Danish monarchy. However, the settlements were originally Norwegian. This brings us to the last leg of the journey from Greenland to America, because the Viking discovery of America was done from Greenland. It would be Leif Erikson, also known as Leif the Lucky, who would explore and settle in America. Leif was the son of Eric the Red and thus an inhabitant of Viking Greenland. It is not known when Leif went to America, but he lived around 970 AD to 1025 AD. Leif and his crew would most likely have followed the normal route south from Greenland by going west toward Baffinland to take the current south. Then, instead of going out into the North Atlantic Current, they would most likely have held west toward the American shore. They would arrive and settle in what they called Windland due to the vines that grew there. It is not known precisely where this settlement was made. However, the remains of Viking settlements have been found in Lounsor Meadow in Newfoundland, Canada. It is thus speculated that this is Leif's American settlement. The name Vinland does point further south, as the wild vines mentioned in Leif's saga are found in New England in the US, but it is clear that the Greenlandic Vikings did settle in America from the archaeological record. The question is only if there are more settlements. Leif might very well have had prior knowledge of land in the west, as the route from Greenland would bring them close to the American coast, so Leif's saga might just be the only remaining written account of Norse settlement in America. There might be more small homesteads waiting to be found beneath the soil of North America. An important note about the settlements of the Vikings in both Greenland and North America is that they consisted of very few people. They truly were just homesteads in the wilderness across the Northern Ocean. To gain new settlers, they had to go back to Norway to find them. In the end, only few joined in, as there were not that many to fuel a settlement. Contact with the Greenlandic settlement was lost in the 1400s, and no record exists for more contact with the Americas. When connection with Greenland was re-established in 1721, no Norse settlers were found there, only the Inuit. The Inuit had not been there when the Vikings had first settled, as they had relocated to hunting grounds further north. It is not known what became of the settlers in either Greenland or America. They might have returned to Iceland or might have been absorbed by the Inuits in Greenland and the native people in America. Who knows, there might have been descendants of Leif Erikson in New England when the Pilgrims arrived.